Well, welcome to my channel Mispronounced Adventures. My name's Alex, and one of the most popular questions at the minute is about heating. And why? Because I'm currently up in the Arctic. I'm in northern Lapland, across Norway, Sweden and Finland. And this is my second winter up here in my van. And why? Because the landscapes are stunning. The sunrises are stunning. The sunsets are stunning. The night skies are stunning. The weather is stunning. Well, maybe less so on that one. It's also stunningly cold. Wow. The hookup cable is frozen. Minus 31. So I'm hoping this can be a short video to show you how I keep things warm. How I keep myself warm.
I did turn the heating on in the van about an hour ago, so it should be nice and toasty.
The engine warm.
Preheater on.
And the lithium batteries warm.
If you want audio.
And a few other things.
It looks frozen.
So heating is a pretty important factor. This is a Chinese diesel heater, which Campervan and Motorhome users on the internet love to argue about. This is an engine preheater, which most people don't know what they do or what they're for. Both really important. So this is my 5 kilowatt Chinese diesel heater. Actually, it's my spare one. The main one's in the van. And to be honest, no one cares if you've got an Webasto, a Webasto, an Autotherm or a Chinese diesel heater. They've all got their pros and cons. So yes, Webasto and Webasto are very high quality units. If they break out here, yes, you'll be able to probably do a warranty claim, but it will take a lot of time to try and get that sorted. Things like the Chinese ones, yep, it might break out here, although do remember with Chinese made diesel heaters that loads and loads of factories make these, and some of them are crap and some of them are really quite good. The one I've got in my van at the minute I've had running for about 2,000 hours before its first service and one winter in it. It was practically clean inside and only needed £6 worth of new bearing. If you've got yourself a Webasto, an Webasto, an Autotherm, maybe consider popping 100 quid or so and having the entire spare Chinese diesel heater up with you as well, including pumps and exhausts, because most of the diesel heaters have the same configuration, doesn't matter which company. So if any of your heaters broke, you could whip out an entire unit and put a £100 Chinese diesel heater in. That could work in an emergency whilst you try to get your main heater fixed. It's all well and good having a good warranty system, but if you've not got any heat in the Arctic, that's less than ideal. For anyone who's going up into the Arctic, consider a diesel heater and definitely a spare unit. Already this winter, I've lent out part of my spare unit to another British van lifer to help them. And in return, another British van lifer gave me his spare part to replace my missing one. Well, now that we're inside, we can look at the diesel heater and how the diesel heater works in my van. It's got a few different uses. One, it heats the entire van. And as I said earlier, not all Chinese diesel heaters are equal, and mine is less equal than others. I've replaced my original controller with a afterburner controller unit, which is a third-party controller, which allows me to do a lot more things such as remote access, so I can turn the diesel heater on from my phone, and also a perfectly working thermostat. So I set the van to maintain 21 degrees, which is my chosen internal temperature, Celsius, and the afterburner controller regulates the diesel heater's pump speed and fan speed to perfectly maintain that, and it works brilliantly even here. Actual diesel consumption over the course of the trip, this is getting towards the second month of this winter trip, and according to the afterburner where I reset the fuel usage at the beginning of the trip, it's used about 150 litres of diesel, which is about 3 litres of diesel a day. And I generally have the diesel heater probably running 16 to 18 hours a day, all the way through the night and most of the evening whilst I'm in the van as well. Considering it gets dark at 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the diesel heater is on for a significant part of the day. Because of that, I have the diesel heater plumbed directly into the main fuel tank of the van and not in a separate 10 litre container, because I'd have to be filling it up a lot. My diesel heater also has a few other roles. It also keeps my shower room warm, that acts as a kit drying room. It has a vent that goes into there. So after I've had a shower, I can leave the diesel heater on. That dries out the room pretty quickly. I can also put wet equipment in there, wet bags, wet clothes, and it dries it out really quickly as well, and has an extractor in the roof. I also use my diesel heater to heat my hot water. I have a Bobble Van's hot water system, which is a heat exchanger, which goes on top of the hot air outlet, and I can divert it to go into the cabin or the habitation area, or divert it to heat the hot water. And it's got about a 2.1 kilowatt exchange rate. So it heats my hot water tank pretty fast. The other thing my diesel heater does is it keeps my lithium batteries warm. But first, I'll go into a few things about lithium batteries. So, lithium batteries. Most people know that generally, lithium batteries cannot be charged below zero, as it will damage the chemistry. Whilst that is a kind of a misconception, overall that's pretty much correct. This winter trip I'm actually testing some of Roma's cold weather temperature lithium, as these are LiPo4 chemistry batteries and they can be charged far below zero without cell heaters, but I have a technical video on those elsewhere on the channel. Go look for that. This trip's been down to -31. So any battery you're installing in your vehicle, you should install in a considerate way to keep it warm. A great way to stop batteries from getting cold is considering how you put them into your van, campervan and motorhome. So a lot of the time batteries just get put in the garage area or in the bottom of a cupboard flat on the floor, and that creates a cold bridge. Just like this, you can imagine you have 100% cold surface contact with the bottom of your battery, even if your van's floor is insulated. But by putting your battery in little stilts, like this example, breaks that cold bridge, and you can change from having 100% contact with a cold floor to maybe 5%. And that makes a far bigger difference. Same even if you were doing an insulated box. Consider taking that insulated box off the ground and having a little air gap beneath it. So this is also another one of the ways my diesel heater keeps my van warm. If it's cold enough for the diesel heater to be on, it's cold enough that the batteries can probably cool down. So I don't directly use the heat from my diesel heater, but I have a PC fan near my diesel heater which wafts the warm air from around the diesel heater unit into the air gap below the battery, and that keeps these batteries, or any battery you would do so, probably around to 18 degrees in my case. And whilst the effects here for lithium are problematic, lead acid and AGM's the same. You can physically freeze the chemistry and you'll have capacity issues as well. So any battery, consider it when you're installing it to have it off the ground, have it potentially insulated. Personally, I don't really like cell heaters inside of batteries for a number of reasons, but a heated plate underneath the battery is a good solution for keeping batteries warm as well if you want an electrical solution. The layout of my van is a little bit different than others. I don't have a huge garage with a fixed bed. My bed folds away. It's still about a Super King when it's down, but I don't have a garage. I've got probably 2/3 worth of garage and storage. So if you've got a garage in your van, consider wherever your diesel heater is placed having some venting going into your garage to keep that warm. That's where a lot of people have their water pipes, their batteries, so try and have some way to keep that warm. Otherwise, in these cold conditions, it will get extremely cold in there and things will start to freeze. In my case, all my plumbing lives in here, as does my electrics and my batteries down there. My diesel heater is located under the fridge, but there is the air mass inside this can go back and forth, because I've got a fan which pulls warm air from this area, which has got all the plumbing in, and pushes it into the battery air, which keeps the batteries warm. The same principle could be done for your garage as well. If you've got your diesel heater, your water, and your batteries in your garage, the diesel heater can help keep everything warm in there. Just consider you may want some venting to help do so. By default, the construction of British self-builds and British motorhomes are not equal to the way they build them up in the Northern Arctic, or even probably Central or Northern Europe. So some of the main considerations I made for my van for the winter is this. So that is my sliding bulkhead door, and that is one of the best things I built for this van to keep it warm in the winter. Yep, some people will put covers over the front windows, but I don't like the idea of having to get out and in the van to put them on and off. A simple sliding insulated door, or even an insulated curtain, does a really great job to cut off all of this glass from the front of the van. You might insulate your van really well, but then you have these massive glass panels at the front letting all that warm air out. And I often find whilst the back of the van will be plus 21 degrees with the heater, in the cab in the morning it can be minus 20 with things freezing over.
Ice is forming on the metal pillars of the van.
As I wanted glass windows for my van, in the winter season I put on insulated covers on the side windows and the rear windows here. And thermally you can see how much of a difference they make. Well, this is an awkward shot for filming. That is a Webasto Thermotop V engine preheater. And that is taken out of a Range Rover Discovery 3. The other one I have is a Range Rover Discovery 4. A kit like that, if you want to buy it brand new, can cost upwards of £1,000 and then some. That one I got off eBay for £28 from a scrapped Discovery. And the spare one I paid 99p for from a scrapped Discovery. The rest of the components, the controller, the piping, the tubing, that probably cost another 90 odd pounds. You can check on my channel to find videos about how to get these units out of scrapped cars working and how to integrate them into most types of vehicle. I'm going to change camera angle. Well, the job of an engine preheater, well, it might sound pretty simple. It heats the engine up to about 80 degrees before you start, and they make a huge difference. On this trip, one of my other friends in their van, they had the same Webasto engine preheater. Unfortunately, their Webasto pump broke in half, so they had to do some of the trip with no engine preheater. And yes, to a degree, you'll eventually get your vehicle to start in the low minus 20s.
Almost.
But it's not great for the engine. It's a lot of wear, it's a lot of stress, and on some of the colder days, you just won't get the engine to start. Has me stuck. So most of my normal days, I come into the cab, turn on the engine preheater.
Preheater on.
Check my little heads-up display.
Engine coolant temperature is currently minus 23.
And generally wait anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes for the engine to get up to 80 degrees, and then it turns on like a summer's day.
Minus 20 outside. As this coolant temperature 80 degrees. Like a summer's day.
But in my eyes, those are probably one of the most important bits to have up here. Many of the Nordic vehicles up here don't necessarily have diesel-powered ones. You'll see a lot of the vehicles up here which plug in with an electric one on car parking spots. But vans in remote places, it's great to have a diesel-powered one. So the concept for an engine preheater is pretty simple. Engines have a coolant loop, but it's not necessarily a singular loop as such. There is a thermostatic valve which opens and closes access to the radiator. So the engine preheater is integrated into the part which has the engine block and the cabin's heater matrix, or the cabin heater. So that heats up the liquid inside the engine block, which circulates through the cabin heater. Here's some thermal footage showing the example of how it works. And then through the engine preheater. And when it's up to temperature, when you're driving, that's when the thermostat can open up, which allows cool air to hit the radiator, normally to prevent the engine from overheating. The radiator cools it down. You kind of have the opposite issue here. So the cold air hitting the radiator causes the engine to cool down so much that it loses temperature and there's no heat left for the cabin or for the engine to run well. So, time to put the engine cover on. That is a grille cover, and it is so unbelievably helpful. Even with an engine preheater and the van up to temperature, driving along, I found in this van, anything below minus 15 or 20, I start to see the coolant temperature drop. So if you're driving at minus 20 and that cold air is hitting your radiator, it cools down the coolant, which means the engine drops below its operating temperature, it loses efficiency, you're running more diesel, it's more wear on the engine. More importantly for you inside, there's no heat left for the cabin heaters, so you can't heat yourself. Putting that on instantly. Grille cover is on, temperature is rising, back up to operating temperatures, cabin heaters back on full, keeping me warm. Those things just make an absolute, it's a massive difference, absolute massive difference. Putting that on instantly stops the cold air hitting the radiator. And whilst I've just made one from an insulating material, you will see custom made ones for vans up here, all the way just to putting cardboard across the grille. Anything which stops that cold air from hitting the radiator whilst driving on the cold days will help keep the coolant warm. Last winter, on the other hand, I had a different issue. The coolant wasn't up to the right freezing level. So on my first really cold night of the trip, it got down to minus 25. The coolant turned to slush, and because of that, the engine preheater's smaller pump couldn't pump it around. Therefore, it couldn't heat the engine, and I couldn't get the van started for about 8 hours. So another part is to consider what lubricants are in your engine. Check your coolant level, make sure the coolant is suitable for the extreme conditions up here, and your oils as well. So my Transit has a 2 litre Eco Blue engine, which is Euro 6, so it already runs a really quite thin oil. But find the spec sheet of your vehicle and what oils it can have, and the spec sheet for that oil to find if it's suitable for this cold temperatures up here. Also, washer fluid as well. That generally freezes pretty quickly if you haven't got stuff suitable for this cold temperature. And when you move off at the beginning of the day, do remember that whilst your engine is preheated, everything else isolated from that isn't. Things like your oils and lubricants in your gearbox and your differential, bearings and other parts of the vehicle won't be heated. So move off slowly and allow those to heat up gradually with use. Well, that's most of the parts for the engine. Engine preheater heats the engine up. Even on warm days where it's only -2 or 3, I'll turn the engine preheater on. Keeps the engine a lot warmer, means my cabin heaters get warmer faster, just nicer on the engine. And you can also keep the engine preheater on whilst driving as well, if you want to on a particularly cold day. And make sure all the lubricants and liquids for the engine all have the appropriate freezing temperatures. But being up here, things will freeze. So backup options like having a heat gun and a way to power it, so I can power it off my inverter, or I can power it off my EcoFlow, is good at melting components. So sometimes doors and locks can freeze, they can get filled with snow, it can get warmer day, that can melt and then it can freeze over. And components of the engine you might want to warm up as well. Starter motors, or in my case, my gear selector cables froze so I couldn't move my gear stick. And a bit of personal admin I have to do every night is I need to remember to take stuff off the floor. Whilst the diesel heater might keep the air in the van warm at 21 degrees, the floor sometimes can still be down to -10, which means my shoes will often freeze to the floor at night if I've brought any snow in and it melts. Things like power banks I have to take off the floor. My 5 litre water bottle has, well, not fully, but started to turn to ice. Well, I hope that's given you a little idea on how I keep myself warm, the habitation of the van warm, the batteries and the engine. I need all of those things to stay working when I'm up here. If you want to see videos about how I've integrated some of the things, particularly on the heaters, I've got videos about how I've done work on the diesel heater, I've got videos about how I got the engine preheaters working, or if you want to see the actual Arctic adventure itself, check out both the playlists for the first winter trip and the second winter trip and all the highs and lows of those. But if you've enjoyed this video or have any more questions, feel free to leave it a like, give a comment if you want to ask anything, and consider subscribing to the channel to see more of the things I get up to. But thank you very much for joining me. Cheers. Bye.